There we go. All right, and I'm gonna just go ahead and bump this up. Ooh, here we are. One participant, which is me. Okay. I'm a little early, everybody, but I'm here to welcome you when you sign on. We have 13 minutes before showtime. Okay. There it is. Okay. Michi, I got gorgeous photos of the greenhouse and all the different orchids, and then kind of fun behind the scenes shots of here are what the orchids look like when they come into boxes. And then we got 200 orchids. Look at all these. Oh, really? And then I have close-ups. Oh, okay, all right. Oh, nice. Oh, nice. It doesn't look like the grocery store. No. Those Oncidiums are so cool. And, they don't have Oncidiums in the grocery store. We just got incredible collection of it. It's really fun. Really fun. Really fun. Okay, cool. All right. Thank you. It's always fun. All right. I did a killer workout this morning. Oh, yeah? Oh, yeah. Well, it was a muscle endurance workout this whole week, and Friday's kind of like the very end of it, where you do, like, we did like the most repetitions all week, and oh my goodness, I was trying to get muscle memory. Unfortunately, the memory is not nice. But it's good. I'm doing this. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's see. Oh, this is good. All right. Cool.
Is the pipe too loud?
No. It's not. It's not too loud at all. Don't worry. Yeah, don't worry at all. Great. Here we go. I love you can see all the controls. Okay. Cute. Okay, still 10 till. Ooh, neato, neato, neato. Oh, how fun. Wow.
What are you doing overall? Are you happy? Good?
Oh, you're telling me? You know what? It's I'm settling back in. You know, which is, which is I'm settling in, which is good. Which is good. Thanks for asking. Christmas was rough.
Really?
Yeah, it was rough. Working. Okay. Welcome, welcome. I'm seeing some people signing in. I'm Jennifer Brennan. I'm the horticulture information specialist at Chalet. And this is going to be such a fun lecture. I got great photos, so you're going to be able to see the details that you need to see. And I think you'll go away from this webinar really understanding and feeling more confident about your orchids. Orchids are just, it's a phenomenal group of plants that is easier than you think, as long as you understand their secret requirements. And it's not really secret requirements, but they're unusual requirements if you're used to working with foliar houseplants, just regular houseplants. So once you understand what orchids need, they actually are easier to care for than most of the houseplants. So you're going to be amazed. So this is how to care for houseplants, or also known as orchids: repotting, dividing, and reblooming. And this is the basic care. Welcome, welcome to Chalet's webinars. And I don't know if you know, but all of our webinars are available even after the live performance through YouTube. And you can access the YouTube channel from the Chalet webpage, or you can just go to YouTube and in the search bar, type in Chalet webinars, and all of them come up. And you can watch them anytime, night or day, for free, no fee. And we want you to be able to learn from those. So that we've been doing that now for, I think, 9 months, but a lot of people have not realized it. So I make sure I announce it at the beginning of each webinar. So we still have some time before we start. We have a good 6 minutes before we start. So I'm just kind of talking and killing time here. These orchids that are on the title screen for the for the PowerPoint were at my mentor's greenhouses, and his name was Herman Pagors. He's in his 80s. He came to the United States when he was 13 and worked for different orchid growers, because this was a really prominent area for especially corsage orchids, back 60 years ago. And because of the wonderful marketing area here, as far as the trains and then the airplanes, it was a great hub to ship those orchids out and all around the country. And so he worked for orchid growers himself, and then saved enough money and bought his own place. And he was one of the prominent tissue culture experts in hybridizing orchids. So he's the one that taught me my knowledge and my love of orchids. So I also was really lucky. I was introduced to orchids when I was an intern at Longwood Gardens back. I'm not going to tell you how many years ago it was. It would surprise you. but and then to encounter Herman Pagors later in life and learn all the details of the different orchids. And I've got the outline they're getting is really going to be helpful for you. So hi, I'm seeing more people have signed on. Welcome to the Chalet webinar. I'm Jennifer Brennan. I'm the Horticulture Information Specialist, and this is orchids. I should check to see what we titled it. It's orchids. It's orchid care. So yeah. So this greenhouse that you're looking at, you know, in this front slide was Herman's greenhouses before he retired and he closed them down. His daughter and son-in-law were helping him run the business for many years, and then they got an opportunity to move out to California, and so he ended up having to close his business down. But his greenhouses were just phenomenal to go see. I have another PowerPoint that I should ask if we can put that just on our webinar series so that people can look at how wonderful his greenhouses were with all the different plants he raised, all the different orchids. I've got some great pictures to share with you. So welcome everybody. I'm seeing more and more people signing on. We're about 3 minutes away from the start, and I've got the title slide from the PowerPoint presentation up on the screen right now. And you know what? I think I'll make some public service announcements while we're waiting to get started. This is the orchid event this weekend, and it starts today, and it goes through the whole weekend, and all of the orchids are 20% off. We got 200 orchids in, and I'm going to show you pictures of them when we get started, and you're going to be dazzled. I'm dazzled looking at all the different varieties that we got in and all the different colors. We also we've extended our indoor plant sale, and we've included all plants, not just a few varieties, but all plants that are in 10-inch pots and larger. They are 25% off. And then we are having an end of season winter apparel sale. So select winter apparel items for both humans and pets, you know, the pet sweaters and the pet coats, they're on sale for 30% off regular apparel, 25% off for pet apparel. I should say 30% off human apparel and 25% off pet apparel. So, you know, with the sun out there, even though it's cold, and we did get snow again, you know, last night, it's beautiful. You know, the roads were pretty clear when I drove in this morning. They're doing a really good job clearing them. And so drive over here and come and visit. It's a beautiful day out there, as long as you stay bundled up, and come and see all the gorgeous sights here at Chalet. So, okay, we've got more and more people are signing on. Welcome, welcome. I'm Jennifer Brennan, the Horticulture Information Specialist at Chalet. And we'll start in 1 more minute. We were going to be sending an email after the presentation is over, encouraging you to come and enjoy the sale plants, and to remind you all the fun things that we have going on here this weekend. Okay. We have more and more. I think to honor the people that signed in on time, I'm going to head and I'm going to start on time. And I do want to ask you to put your questions and answers in the Q&A box, or you can see where the Q&A is at the bottom of your screen. type your questions in that rather than the chat box. And then when the presentation is over, I'll take as long as we need to answer all your questions. So usually I'll get to questions, you know, the topics. So if you wait till the end, jot down what your questions are and you can type them in and I'll get back to you. So I think let's go ahead and get started. What I want to show you first, oh goodness, that's not the right way to do it. Hold on. There we go. Okay. So this is the view of the greenhouse. And you can see all of the gorgeous orchids from, you know, this is what you see when you walk in the door, and you can see all the beautiful displays that our visual people made with the orchids that came in. This is like almost, I think it almost is as good as the orchid show up at the Botanic Garden. So, and then we're gonna go here. These are the, I'm seeing more people sign in. Thank you so much. There's one question. It always makes me nervous when I see a question at the very beginning. My orchid has many aerial roots. I'll get back to that. Okay, and that's Catherine. I'll get back to that, Catherine. Okay. Okay, we're gonna minimize that. And I'll talk about that during the presentation. So I think you'll have the answer, but then I'll get back to you, you know, after the presentation is over. I just want to point out, look at these beautiful Oncidiums right in the middle, right in the front of the screen. When you look at the petal, you can see that the bottom petal looks like it's a skirt. And so the nickname for those orchids are dancing ladies. They're the dancing ladies. The orchids on the left side and right side are the classic moth orchids, or the Phalaenopsis. And the reason they're named that is because the petals look like a moth that has landed, and they have their petals wide open. And then you can see the beautiful fuchsia and pink cattleyas just in the upper left-hand center, and then the little miniature Phalaenopsis over off to the side. And there's one little painted lady way down in the left-hand corner, but I've got more that I'm going to show you. So don't worry, don't worry. Oh, I have to do this one. And then this was the Phalaenopsis table. Look how gorgeous this is, and the colors, the hot pinks, the multicolored ones, the yellow ones. Oh my gosh! If this doesn't cheer you up, I don't think anything will. They're absolutely beautiful, absolutely beautiful. This is a night shot, or the end of the day when the lights were on. It's just as gorgeous late in the evening. And but have you noticed though now that the days are getting longer and longer? I go to a studio Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5. I leave at 5:45, and my workout is from 6 to 6:45. And today was the first day the sun was up when I was driving, to the studio in the morning, and it's getting nice. We still have light at the end of the day too, so it's getting later and later before the sun goes down. Okay, now this is an adorable planter that is done by our signature team, and it's a combination of the miniature Phalaenopsis and the ivies. It's a variegated English ivy, and then those are birch stems in it. Such a beautiful winter look, absolute winter look. So, okay, and then now we're in the center of the store. We have a big table set up, surrounded by all the foliage plants, which, and I mentioned earlier, and for those who have signed on later, the foliage plants are actually 25% off anything in a 10-inch pot or larger. So it's a great value if you're still interested in getting more houseplants in your home. Now we're looking at the photo of the lady slipper orchids, and they came in really tight in bud, and they've been opening and opening and opening. Now, and the one that is right in the center, I've got a better picture to show you. This photo right here, the tall climbing orchids are the vanilla orchids. And that is the plant, and it's more of a vine, and it's a real waxy leaf vine, and it will flower. Now, when you have vanilla orchids, you do have to hand pollinate them yourself, because in their native environment, they're pollinated by a wasp, and they don't occur here. So you have to use a paintbrush and dab the pollen and then paint it onto the stamen. So you know, it's kind of like you know, the birds and the bees lecture as well. But gorgeous, gorgeous. These plants are just doing beautifully. Here's the close-up of the lady slippers, and then also the background shows the brand, the Hoffman brand of one of our good bark mixes. It's the orchid bark mix, and it's a chunk bark that's the best for repotting. And I'm going to get into those details in just a second. All of the supplies for our orchids for the orchid event weekend, all the supplies like the bark mixes, the fertilizers, any of the insecticides, and any of the orchid pots, everything is 20% off this weekend because of the orchid event. Okay, now this is what the orchids look like when they come in from our supplier. Look at these boxes, and they're usually covered with with either brown paper covering or a nice plastic covering that helps hold the warm air around those orchids, so they're not damaged when they're carried in and out from the from the warm greenhouses into the cold air. But we, like I said, there's 200 orchids here, and like all the ones I was pointing out, in the house. So this is what they look like when they come in. Okay, I love cattleyas. When I was in college, I worked for a woman who had an orchid collection, and she was an economics professor at the University of Illinois. And she, in her age, when she was aging, she ended up in a wheelchair, so she couldn't even go into her greenhouse. So she posted a sign over she had her live-in nurse post a sign over at the horticulture building asking for a horticulture student would be interested to help her with her orchids. And so I helped Mrs. Townsend for the 3 years that I was at the University of Illinois, and learned a lot. I learned a lot from her. And she would come up to Hauserman's twice a year to this huge Cadillac. She'd drive that Cadillac up here and then come back with all her orchids. So I have a fond place in my heart for the Cattleyas. Here, the close-up of the Oncidiums, and these are they call the dancing ladies. And what's great about these is they're fragrant at night, and so you get that wonderful fragrance in your home in the evening as well. Another different variety. I love this orange and rust color. Now, for Orchid Botany, there are over 30,000 species and varieties of orchids around the world in almost all climates. There are epiphytic. Epiphytic means that they live up in trees, and they position themselves in the axils of tree branches. They're also terrestrial orchids, and that means they live in the soil, in the ground. Most are rhizomatous, and they call it's a monopodial growth habit, which means they grow in one direction, not unlike our irises that in our gardens here. They have a plant structure. There's the leaves, a pseudobulb that stores the food. The rhizome is an underground stem, and then they have roots, and then the flower stems, and then at the base of each of the pseudobulbs, before it attaches to the roots, are resting eyes. And those are eyes like we have eyes on a potato. So new plants can start from those resting eyes. Okay, now roots may be air roots or conventional roots. The aerial roots will anchor the plant onto the structure upon which it is sitting or attached to. And the roots will breathe, take in oxygen, they'll take in moisture, and then also nutrients, as well as storing all of those things, nutrients, water in roots, and also the pseudobulbs. Okay, the ones that do this the most frequently are the Epiphytics and the Phalaenopsis. Okay, they photosynthesize. Like other plants, they use the sunlight to and carbon dioxide, pardon me, to make carbohydrates or sugars, and then they release oxygen. Okay, they actually are triggered by short days and cool nights to go into bud, and that's what causes them to set their flower buds, and then they bloom in fall and winter. That's most of them. Now, there are some that bloom also in different tropical areas late in the season, but the ones that we can grow are short day stimulated, and then they bloom in fall and winter. Now, the sources for plants are, there's a then and a now, and it's difficult to grow them from seed to bloom. So most often orchids are cloned, or it's tissue culture, or divisions. And cloning is when you divide the plant. Okay, these are examples of the epiphytics, and you can see the Phalaenopsis over in the left-hand photo, and then over in the right upper photo is one of the Oncidiums, and that's the dancing ladies. These are the terrestrial ones. So the painted ladies can actually live in the ground, in soil in the ground, and it's usually pretty rocky soil. Over in Virginia, there are a lot of native of the lady slippers. This one is a native also over here, that purple one. This is the showy orchis in Illinois. We have native ones in Illinois. And then down at the bottom of the screen, I'm sorry, it was kind of cutting off. This is a beautiful, again, soil orchid, and they also call it a velvet orchid. Now, this is, I think, why most people are on this webinar, to learn about repotting. Repotting is the most important task to have orchid success, to have your orchids do well. And it's the most intimidating thing for people. And it's amazing. People don't realize that it needs to be done every 1 to 2 years. I'm holding up 2 fingers, either every 1 to 2 years, depending on the growth habit of the plant. And these photos that are on the screen are just showing you the different types of, the orchid roots, and what happens when you pull that plant out of the roots. And the most difficult thing is that you need to do that before you can decide if the plant needs to go into a larger pot or stay in the same size pot it's in, just with fresh medium or fresh orchid mix. So the picture in the center, shows orchid roots that are not healthy. And I'm going to show you some more details here. Let's keep going. Okay, so now we want to talk about repotting and mounting. Those are the 2 ways that we handle orchids. And so you need to know the why, the when, and the how. Bark mixes are the best. And bark mixes are the best medium for orchids. It keeps them the happiest and the healthiest. And I guess I should say more, keeps them the healthiest. And then because they're healthy, they're happy. But you do have to make sure that bark is firmed very tightly so it has contact with the roots. Many orchids these days that you purchase are in sphagnum moss, and it's risky. It's risky to keep them in sphagnum moss because the sphagnum moss tends to stay too moist, and so then the roots aren't healthy. They don't get as much oxygen. Sphagnum moss is the most popular to be used from the growers that grow from out of the country, and they have to ship these plants in, because the moss stays moist long enough. They don't have to worry about the plants being stressed when they're in transit and not getting watered. But if you're going to keep them in sphagnum moss, you water less and you feed them less frequently. I'm not encouraging that. I'm going to show you the proper way. Okay, pro mixes are good for a few select varieties. And I'll explain what that means, a pro mix. You mostly want to use clay pots or plastic pots, and then you wind the roots around before you set them inside the pot. I'm going to show you photos. You can trim long roots off of most orchids that have a pseudobulb. So if they have a pseudobulb, they've stored enough energy in that you can trim the roots off. If they don't have a pseudobulb, you need to leave the roots, and I'm going to show you photos. Okay, water less for the few weeks after repotting because you want to encourage root growth, and you want to keep those old roots alive. And after you've repotted, sometimes they can get cracked, and you don't want to keep them too moist, or they can get a root rot. Now you repot the Phalaenopsis in late summer through fall, and most of the others in spring, or spring or July. My favorite fertilizer to recommend is the Dynagrow orchid mix or the grow mix. When you are repotting, there's also a great product called Dynagrow KLN, which is a rooting concentrate, and it actually has 2 rooting hormones in it. It has endobutyric acid, or IBA, and also NAA, naphthalactic acetic acid. And those are naturally produced by the plants, but when you can add it, it helps them root better. Now, there is a repotting video. We used to always do an orchid repotting workshop once a month in the education center, and then COVID set in, so we couldn't do it. So we recorded me showing you how to repot, and that's on the YouTube page, and you just type in Chalet Orchid Repotting video. You can use this address and go right to it when you're not watching this. Okay, now this is the brand that we carry here at Chalet that I really like, and I love how Herman Pagors gave me his approval on these. My favorite is the Phalaenopsis one, the big bag off to the left, because it has extra sphagnum moss in it, and that keeps it moist. It has the chunk fir bark, chunk horticultural charcoal, and then the white perlite, which aerates the mix. If you don't want to buy as big a bag, you just go with the special orchid mix. That doesn't have the extra sphagnum moss in it. And if you just want to get plain orchid bark, Better Grow has just only a chunk bark, mix that you can get. Now, this is what the Phalaenopsis mix looks like out of the bag. And you can see the chunk bark. You can see the pieces of the sphagnum moss. They're kind of chunky. And then the black is the horticultural charcoal, and the white is the perlite, and that's the formula. And then this is the medium that we would always use, that I would always use, and we would provide for the orchid repotting workshop. Hopefully we'll be getting those back. I haven't heard any news on it though yet. Now I always added the extra sphagnum moss to give it, to make sure it stays nice and moist. And that's what's in this. And this looks like a block. It's usually about 10 inches long and 4 inches, it kind of square. And I use a quarter of the package. I pull that apart. It feels like a sponge, a dry sponge. And then I go to the sink, put it in a bowl of water, and squeeze it till it soaks up a lot of water. And then I wring it out like a damp sponge, and then shred it and put it in the bag. I put it in this bag and mix it with all that bark mix. And that's the mix that we use in the orchid repotting workshop. These are mounted orchids, and some of the smaller ones work beautifully being mounted on. These are actually roof tiles, and or just pieces of wood, and you use the sphagnum moss underneath the plant, and then put it on top of the plant, and then use fishing line to tie it all on there. And let's go over here. And this is the epidendrum. Epidendrum radicans is what we're looking at. All of these are the epidendrum radicans, and this is what it looks like when it blooms. It's just a gorgeous orchid. Okay, now here's we're going to go through how to tell when you need to repot. And the orchid will tell you, and these are the signs that indicate that it's time to repot. When you have the aerial roots emerging from the main stalk or out of the upper surface of the potting mix, and these two orchids are showing you that exactly. You can see the one to the left was taken out of its pot, and you can see the healthy roots are white and green. And then you can see all the white aerial roots that are growing out of the top stem. Excuse me, I'm going to get a sip of coffee. Okay, the orchid on the right probably has not been repotted for quite a while. So you can see how many of the aerial roots are growing out of the main stem and telling me and or the owner, wow, I need to have my mix changed so I have a healthier growing situation down here. This is what we normally look at when an orchid comes in for the workshop or when you're at home. And you're looking and say, wow, those look pretty good. Those green roots look pretty nice. I want to point out at the top edge of the pot, see the scarring on that root where it's bending to go down into the pot. That's a sign that that orchid had been watered with ice cubes. And that's a group in Ohio that put out the ice orchids. And they produce these mostly for florists that are using orchids in arrangements that don't have drainage. They make these, you know, and we do it too here at Chalet. We make these beautiful arrangements in gorgeous containers with no drainage because they would be sitting in the middle of a dining room table. And you know, if you have a $50,000 mahogany table, you do not want any water to come out of that vase. And so by laying ice cubes on top of the bark and letting it melt slowly, it hydrates the bark, and then the roots can absorb water. But unfortunately, people aren't as careful about where they place the ice, and you can get this damage, you know, on the roots. I for one don't like to recommend using ice at all. It's better to use you know, room temperature water, and water the whole pot, put it in the sink, let it drain, water a second time and let it drain. You're actually leaching out minerals that way, and then use your favorite fertilizer, Dynagrow brand Orchid Pro or Grow, and you mix that at a half a teaspoon in a gallon and pour 2 cups of that mix down through, and you're replenishing the nutrients that way. Now, here's how the first steps. You want to remove the pot from, or the plant from the pot and all the roots, and just remove every bit of the medium, knock it all off. And orchids are the only plant you do this to. You want to see naked roots and all those naked roots. And then here's what it's going to look like when all that bark has been removed. And then you can look at, you know, at the health of the different roots. So looking here, and this is a great diagram where you can see the healthy roots are the one with the green check mark. And it is, you know, they're either green or they're white. And then in the middle picture where there's the first red X, you can see how those roots are dry. The vellum, which is the white kind of structure on the outside of the root, it died. And so you're just seeing the thin string of the root. And you can see that more so over on the far right photo. These are all roots that have rotted because it was too wet in the medium. And so all of those should be cut off. So you're going to use a good pruning shear, clean it off with either alcohol. This is a cotton swab with alcohol in it, or what Herman always recommended was to use TSP. It's called trisodium phosphate, and you can get that in any hardware store. And you mix it. He would do like a coffee can, and he would just put his tools in there. The reason he likes the trisodium phosphate is it gets rid of any fungus, any bacteria, but also virus. And one of the worst diseases for orchids is virus. and you spread the virus with your cutting tools. So the trisodium phosphate is probably the best, but alcohol, will work for you if that's all you have. I joke with people, if you don't have the rubbing alcohol to clean it, you can use any alcohol that you drink, and it will also, work just like rubbing alcohol. It's a little more expensive to do that, but if you're in a bind, just use your vodka or your gin and to clean your pruning shears. Okay, now this is really interesting to see, and there's so many times that this happens in that it has happened in my repotting workshops. By the time you prune all of the damaged roots away, you're looking at a plant like the one right on the left over here that has aerial roots coming out of the stem, but not a lot of roots, from down in the root area. Don't worry, as long as you've got, 3 or 4 roots in the root zone, and you have those aerial roots, that plant can recover. And then, this shows the right-hand side shows trimming off the different, the different damaged roots, and the ones that are black or brown, or, it looks like a string because the vellum has pulled off, you just cut those off and get rid of them. Okay, then it's time to repot. And you can use it. Okay, let's go back for a minute. If you're down to that few number of roots, like the one on the left, you're going to use the same pot that you took it out of, because roots like to be really snug, in the pot. So you're going to use the same pot. And I love the clear pots with the slices in them, and that's what most of our orchids come from our suppliers in. So you can use that. It always helps to wash it with hot soapy water and rinse it well, just to make sure you don't have any disease on it. And then you want to put fresh bark mix down in the bottom of the pot, and then wrap the roots all around, and then sort of stick them down in to see if they'll fit in the pot. And this picture up to the right shows how to do that. What I don't like about that one picture, though, is that I didn't put any of the bark in the bottom. So you want to add about 1 inch to 1.5 inches of the fresh bark mix in the bottom, and then do this. This is a better view of it. So you can see how, I'm holding that orchid over the pot, and then I'm getting ready to put that bark mix down in around those roots, and to make sure they're all completely surrounded by the bark mix. Here's a better photo showing that as well. You can see that how I'm using my hand to just drop in the bark in between those roots, and then I take my fingers and to really firm it down so that there's no air pockets, and you firm all those roots. Now Herman Pagors, when he would do this, it used to just break my heart. And because he would really put a lot of pressure on top of the bark. And I always thought it was damaging the roots. Not at all. You want it as close and tight to those roots as possible. Now, he would always do this trick where he would take the orchid by the leaves and pull it up, and it would lift the pot. And I'm not kidding, not just a little light plastic pot like this, but ceramic pots, clay pots, and he would lift it up, and the plant would stay in it. I have done that twice in the 15 years or 18 years that I've worked with Herman. I just don't get them as tight as I should. But so then what you do is take your the pot to the sink, and then run the water through it, fill the water to the top of the pot, and allow it to drain. Then repeat that. Fill the water to the top of the pot, allow it to drain, and then use your fertilizer solution, either the Orchid Pro from Dynagrow, which is a 786, or the Grow from Dynagrow, which is a 795. I actually prefer the Grow because it has that higher phosphorus. It really keeps the plants in bloom longer and better. They both have the same number and the same micronutrients. 11 micronutrients with the macros. That's what makes it such a great fertilizer to use. Okay, now I'm gonna go through the most important genera for you to know about. And this was taught to me by Herman about these are the most easy to grow in the home because they're natural conditions. They're the conditions where they are native match our home conditions so closely. So number one is the Phalaenopsis, all the way down to the Vandas and the Ascocenda. And I'm going to just go through these. Now, the Phalaenopsis, I love that variety. I own one of those. I just love that variety. They like to grow warm. They're considered a warm grower. And 72 degrees is considered warm for an orchid. Guess what? That's our room temperature of our homes. They like medium light or bright light. They prefer a bark mix. They are heavier feeders than most of the orchids. So you can use the Dynagrow fertilizer every week, and it's wonderful for them. Annual repotting, usually in a plastic pot in September. Okay. Now, I forgot to mention back in the repotting section, never, ever, ever repot an orchid that's in flower. Because when you repot it in flower, the roots get permission to grow. And roots use the same nutrients that the flowers use. So the roots will rob the nutrients from the flowers and will abort the flowering process. So if you have an orchid in bloom and you want to keep it in bloom, wait till it finishes before you repot. All right. Okay. Now, Paphiopedilums are the ladies' slippers. And these are warm or cool. The variegated ones are cooler, and they're from excuse me. The variegated ones are Asian, and they like it warmer. The green-leafed ones like it cooler. They prefer lower light because they live on the floor of woodlands or tropical rainforests. So they get lower light down in at those lower levels. They prefer plastic pots. They need to be repotted annually, and lighter fertilization for these. They don't need to be fertilized quite as often or as much. Dendrobiums. Now, the dendrobiums are called dendrobium. There's the Dendrobium nobile and the Dendrobium Phalaenopsis. And this is the Phalaenopsis, species of Dendrobium. They're also a warm type, so 72 degrees in our homes. They can take brighter light. So I have mine growing in a south window, and they like clay pots because they don't like to dry out as much as the straight Phalaenopsis do. They really like to be in smaller pots than you would ever think. So unfortunately, they get tall, especially when they're in bloom. So they tend to tip over. So they like to be in a larger holding pot. So the plants in a small pot, but put them in a larger display pot, to display them in your home. And biannual repotting. So that means repotting every 2 years, for these. Oncidiums, these are the dancing ladies. And when you see the flower up close, it looks like they have a formal gown on with that large lower petal. They're intermediate to warm. So they can be in a cooler window, a cooler room, medium to bright light. I have mine right in the window in a south window. And then these, like, again, repotting every other year in either clay or plastic is fine for the Oncidiums. The epidendrum is intermediate to warm, medium to bright light. These also need to be repotted every 2 years. And some of these you can mount them on wooden boards. They're wooden boards. These can be a little more difficult to bring into bloom if you don't have the temperature, right at the right time. But they're gorgeous with the elongated trunk, or trumpet on them. Okay. Miltonias are the pansy type orchids. That's the classic one, is in the middle of the screen right there. Intermediate to cool. And so people have a difficult time bringing these back into bloom. They're also called the spider orchids, like the Brassia. because they have these long, elongated petals on the flowers that make them look like long-legged spiders. They need annual or repotting every other year in plastic pots. They don't like to get too dry, so you need to keep these. And they like lower light levels. So these would be fine in a north window if you have a north or an east window, in your home. Okay, Vandas and the Ascoscendas are pretty difficult for us to rebloom in our areas because they're intermediate to warm growing. They really want it humid. These do better in Florida, or in subtropical areas. They love bright light, clay pots that dry out quickly, or even a wooden basket like in the picture in the middle with just coconut chips as medium around. And they're heavy feeders. But even Herman used to say that even in his greenhouses, because we were so hot in the summer times, he would have difficult times getting these to go back into bloom because he just couldn't keep them cool enough to trigger the bloom. So they're beautiful. You see them at the orchid shows, but they're toughies. They're toughies. And Cattleyas. Okay, Cattleyas. This is I was talking about Mrs. Townsend, and the Cattleyas are the classic corsage orchids, and they like intermediate temperatures, bright light, plastic pots. They don't like to dry out too much. You can go and you can get by with repotting these only once every 2 years. And these actually love to grow outside in a shadier location, like the north side of the house, from May 15th to September 15th. And the one problem though is you have to protect them from the squirrels. The squirrels love to chew on them. So, but they're absolutely gorgeous. This is what the pseudo bulb looks like on a Cattleya. It's elongated, kind of wrinkled. And what happens is it enlarges and gets engorged when it's nicely watered. When it's dry or older, you can see the wrinkles in it. And this orchid is growing from the left of the screen all the way to the right. So you can see the smaller pseudobulbs are the older ones because it was a younger plant then. And as it's moved over and over and over, and it just grew across the top of that pot. So you could divide this one. When you divide, you want to make sure that it has 3 pseudobulbs. So you could actually make 1, 2, 3, 4 plants out of this one and divide it up and share it with people. But okay, so let's go this way. Now then we have the Cymbidiums and the Dendrobium nobiles. The Cymbidiums are like the upper right, and they're phenomenal. But these can be difficult to get rebloom because they like cool nights. And so these you need to leave outside and let them grow outside in the summertime and leave them out through September until the night temperatures start dropping down into the 50s. And then that will trigger the bloom and when you bring them back inside. Now, the Dendrobium nobiles, which is the one right in the center of the picture here, and then the foliage off to the left, they actually drop all their leaves off the stem when you bring them in the fall. And then when they start blooming again, all the flowers come up all up and down the stems, and then the leaves grow back. So they are beautiful, but again, tough because you have to have the cooler temperatures. You have to honor it that way. Okay, now, growing them to bloom abundantly, you want to create the ideal growing climate, what they're used to, what I just went through with all of those. So the ideal temperatures for the various ones, warm means, if it was a warm growing one, it means the minimum temperature it can be exposed to is 65 degrees. Intermediate is 58 degrees, in the 50s. Cool is 50 to 55. Now, after the plants are watered on cold, cloudy days, if you're raising them in a greenhouse, you need to raise the temperature by 3 to 5 degrees at night. Otherwise, that higher humidity will cause the temperatures to drop. And that's really in greenhouses only, but it's interesting to understand that. These were some of the beautiful varieties in Herman's greenhouse. So I'm just kind of teasing you with this. Now the other elements that you need to consider to keep your orchids blooming and growing abundantly is light. It is the most critical. And there are a lot of people that will come in and tell me that their orchids have bloomed for year after year after year and they've never fertilized. That tells me that they have them in perfect, the highest light level they can give them, and it's really good quality light. So if you give them good light, that is the magic ingredient. If you don't have enough light coming in through your windows, you can always use artificial light. And what's fun are the LED bulbs that we have that we're selling, because they don't require a lot of electricity. They don't put out a lot of heat, but they give just the right amount of light. The rule of thumb is run them 1 hour longer than the day length that you're experiencing outside. And that will get the equate. This is was one of Herman's mother plants of this type of spider orchid. And then humidity is also very, very important and critical, for orchids. And you can help increase the humidity by grouping your plants together in the same room. You can close and redirect the heat registers near them. You can use humidity trays that are like saucers with gravel in them, and or elevated humidity trays, that have a grid that the pot sits on, and then the water sits down below. You can mist them on sunny warm days, and you can also keep the room cooler at night to help increase the drop your temperature down at night to increase your humidity. Now, air movement, I think, is overrated, and Herman used to always say that. You always see, and read about orchids growing in very humid areas like Florida, having fans to help, blow, and blow, the air around. But here in our area, because the humidity is so low in the winter times, we just, we don't advocate that at all, because you can actually dry the plants out worse than if you didn't do that. Now, shading the orchids from direct south sun can be essential, if you have them right up next to a window, and depending on which variety that you have. So be aware of that you can get sunburn on the leaves. If you have leaves that are looking too yellow, it can indicate that it's too much sunlight rather than not enough fertilizer. If you're fertilizing an orchid and it's yellow, that means it's getting a little sunburn. Now, this is damage to my Oncidium, because I let it get too dry in between waterings. It actually needed to be repotted. That was getting too dry in between, and I was watering it once a week. And so then the leaves turned into it looks like a fan, because they didn't extend out, and unfortunately they get stuck like that. So they still are photosynthesizing. It's just they don't look so good. So now you can use special efforts to get stubborn orchids to go ahead and bloom. And number one, the first thing to do is put it in an area that has more light. That usually is the first thing that you can do. You can also put it in a room where the nights are cooler than the day. Many orchids respond to that differentiation. And another plant that does that are gardenias. They like the night temperatures to be 10 degrees cooler than the day temperatures. And you can achieve that by putting them right up next to a window in the wintertime. Check your fertilizer with your orchids. If you're using a 311 or a 30-10-10, which is in a lot of the literature for growers to use, because the bark breaks down so quickly in a greenhouse situation, they need to provide more nitrogen. But a lot of times, if you're using that formula, you get big leafy green plants and not enough and no flowers. So I always like to encourage people to use a higher phosphorus, and I'm going to show you a photo of the ones that we sell here. And then you also want to let your orchids dry in between waterings during the winter months. Let them get a little drier than you would normally think. Give them more space, which means repot them. If you have a plant that's gotten really tight in the pot and it's not blooming, either divide it to give them more room or just repot it in a larger pot. And then I just talked about dividing a crowded plant. Now here's the fertilizing. And I talk about the Dynagrow Orchid Pro, which is 7.86. It's actually 11 micronutrients. And then we have the Dynagrow Liquid Grow Food, which is 7.95 with 11 micronutrients. And you mix that at a half a teaspoon in a gallon. And that's the cap size. Now, if you're growing them in greenhouses or sunrooms, Jack's 30-10-10 is good. I just talked about the 30-10-10. Or we also have the Better Grow Orchid food, which is a granular that you have to dissolve in water. And it's a 15-35-15. And you use that as 1 teaspoon. And I'm just going to show you what this looks like. So here's the Orchid Better Bloom, 11-35-15. There's the Grow, 7.95. And then the Orchid Pro at 7.86. This is Jack's. And Jack's took over from Peters. Jack was the owner of the Peters company. That was his son. And this is a 3.96. So that's a pretty good one too. That's a pretty good one too. Okay. And then now I'm moving on to how to trim the flowering stalk after the blooms are gone. Okay. That's second question after how to repot. So for healthy green spikes, okay, and you can see these are all green because the flower buds had just dropped off. You want to find a node, under where the lowest flowering bloom was, and then trim 1 inch above that node. And I have a better picture to show what a node looks like. So for unhealthy or for the brown spikes, and I shouldn't call them unhealthy. If they're brown, which means they're finished, you cut it off at the base of the plant. See where the arrow is down at the base of that plant, but those two are green ones. Okay, so for a double spike, cut 1 spike at the base of the plant and 1/3 the length of it. And this shows a spike that is turning brown. That means it's finished. The plant either needs to be repotted so it can't support it. And if it turns brown and you caught you off guard, don't worry about it. It's not a guilt thing. You just come in and prune it off right above where it was emerging from the main part of the leaf. Okay, on the one that's over to the right, see how it's just brown down to the green section? Come down to the node. I would prune below the node that's just showing there, right below that, or and where it's still green, you might get another a bloom spike coming off of it. Now, this is the live spent blooms, and you want to you prune above a node. I was talking about a node. So see where the pruning shears are, the scissors are above that node. Look over here on the right, and you can see at the node and the detail next to it how a new shoot is coming out. So if you prune right above that, that's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. Okay, now if you have a Kiki that forms, and a Kiki is the Hawaiian term for a baby plant, and Kikis can form on those finished blooming stalks. And so if a Kiki forms, what will happen is you'll see the leaves first, and then wait, and keep fertilizing, keep it in bright light, keep fertilizing once a week, and it's getting its nutrient from the spike, from the mother. And then once it's formed, like at least 3 roots like this, then you can come in, prune it off, just cut the old blooming spike right below where the Kiki's attached, and then pot this up like you would repot a regular orchid. Okay. Now, if you have insects, and it's a necessary evil, but it's really easier with orchids than most plants. And the most common orchid pests are snails and slugs, and they'll climb up the flowering stem and eat the flower petals. It's disgusting. And you don't see them because they feed at night. You just see the damage. And then they also get scale, mealybugs, aphids, and thrips, which are all sucking insects. They can get spider mites, but it's really rare, really rare. So what you want to do is you want to treat the possible infestations only when they occur, and with this specific pesticides. So I like the systemic liquid sprays like the Rose and Flower from the Bio Advanced. You spray it on the leaves, it's absorbed in the leaves and the stems and stays in for 30 days. And any insects sucking the juices of those plants, get killed. And you can spray once a month and keep them nice and clean and tidy. Now there's also, oh, I don't have a picture of it. I can't believe it. There's also the Bio Advanced 3-in-1 insect disease and mite control. And it's also a translaminar systemic that you spray one side of the leaf and it's pulled through and goes through all the cells of the leaf. That's my favorite. You can only spray that one outside. So you have to take the plant outside to spray it. Once it's dry, you bring it back in. There's also the Espalma earth tone insect spray. You can use horticultural oil. I don't like alcohol. Insecticidal soap is kind of worthless. And but you can also use the bonide systemic granules and sprinkle those in, and then they get absorbed by the roots. My favorite though is to spray it on, on with one of the systemics. It really does a good job. And then now we're at, oh gosh, I finished just in time, like 8 minutes before. These were stars from my orchid repotting workshops from before COVID-19. We repotted these plants, and this customer sent the picture showing how they were in bloom. And they bloomed about, I think it was about 3 months after they were repotted. And so I was real proud of this. I'm very proud of this, to see this. And then I always like to thank my mentor, Herman Pagars. This is Herman back in his lab and his tissue culture lab. And I wasn't allowed to go in. I could just stick my camera in to take his photo, or he would poke his head out because he had to keep it sterile. Nothing could go in with the tissue culture. So I always give my thanks to Herman. And again, thank you for attending the Chalet webinars. I'm going to look at the questions and answers. Here we go. Here we go. Okay, so Catherine Frey, is it Frey or Fry? You talked about how your orchid has a lot of aerial roots. Should I repot it and wind the roots in the soil? I'm hoping that the presentation answered that. Yes, yes, yes. When you repot it and make sure it's not in bloom, and then repot it and get all of those roots in the fresh mix, and you'll be amazed how it'll perk back up. Thank you. That was a great question. Then this is anonymous attendee. Should orchids be fertilized year round? Yes, I'm going to say yes. You'll read a lot from different horticulturists and different people that say don't fertilize during the off season when the days are short. Since orchids bloom during the short days and they're triggered the short days, I say just go ahead and use, especially if you're using the Dynagrow, which is just a 795. And if they're at room temperature and you have good light, the plants are going to use it. So I say keep doing it, and they really benefit from it. That was a great question. Excellent. This is another anonymous attendee. Oh, I skipped one. This is Joan. Does Chalet have the clear pots for repotting? Joan, I am so sorry. We do not. And that's something that is on my to-do list to see if we can get those. And what I'll do, kind of stay tuned. And that's one thing that since doing the repotting, I've always wanted to try to get those. So I apologize, we don't have them right now, but stay tuned. I'll see what we can. I'm going to keep trying to get those. Okay, then this is for a healthy Phalaenopsis that is being fed every week. How long would you expect it to bloom? Ooh, that's a good question. Okay, if you're giving it enough light, then it is possible for a Phalaenopsis to stay in bloom for 6 to 8 months. So, and we've seen them, the spike just keeps getting elongated and elongating. Sometimes when you prune it back a third, another spike comes off that same one. So it's not unusual with good fertilizer and, bright light. The light is a lot of times the key factor in that. Great question. Very good question. Okay. And then this is Merle Hunter. You recently sold me an orchid. Oh, sold me Orchid Pro. What is the difference with orchid with grow? Okay, it's either called Orchid Pro or it's Dynagrow Orchid Pro or Dynagrow Grow, Grow. The difference is Orchid Pro is 786, Grow is 795. They both have the same 11 micronutrients. And I have a feeling that, Merle, when we were talking, you only had orchids, and so you didn't have other plants, other house plants that you would be using it on. So we both agreed that the Orchid Pro would be just perfect and just fine. Good question. Okay. Now, Anonymous, talk a bit more about aerials. If I only have one, does that mean I should repot? Aerials. Oh, aerial roots. Okay. Yes. Okay. If there's only one coming out of the plant, then what you need to ask yourself or ask, your orchid is, how long has it been since it's been repotted? If it's been more than a year, then yes, go ahead and repot. Now, the aerial orchids or the aerial roots can form when it's very humid outside, and they naturally form in our summer times when it's so humid. If the potting mix has not been changed, the bark mix has not been changed, or if it's in only sphagnum moss, for a year or 2 years especially, then go ahead and repot it. Good question. And then this is Megan D. What do you do with a Kiki at the base of a Phalaenopsis orchid? When it's at the very base, then it's what we call a division. And so when you take the plant out of the bark mix, knock all the bark off, you can actually just gently twist and separate and pull them apart. The Kiki will actually just, come apart from the adult. I like to encourage people to do that, just twisting and turning to get them apart rather than cutting. When you cut, you can damage, more tissue than you really, would like to. But, usually you can just twist them and you can gently pull them apart, and they completely separate. That was a really good question. Thank you. Okay, and then Carol, Phalaenopsis with older leaves has 2 leaves which are splitting at the tip. Should I live with it or not? Yeah, you have all kinds of dormant eyes, at the base. And when they have the splitting leaves at the tip, a lot of times they just, when they were packaged up or in shipping, they're packed real close together, it can cause the leaves to crack. And when you get it in a healthier situation, new leaves will form, from the crown or the growth point, and they'll be fine. But if there's green leaves on it and any roots on it, you can always save it. So that was a good question. So, well, I am so happy that we had so many people, and there's some chats. So I'm going to go on the chat. You must have signed in a little later. Okay, thank you so much. Oh, that's from Catherine Bray, Mary Robbins. My Phalaenopsis is doing well, but there's one of the leaves that was evidently damaged slightly and has a small hole. Is it better to leave it, or should be cut off? You know what? If depending on the number of plants, number of leaves you have, Mary, I would leave the one with the hole until you start getting new ones. And then if you don't like how it looks, you can always trim it off afterwards. But even any of the green part on the leaf is photosynthesizing and doing a lot of good work for the orchid. So wait till you start seeing new leaves. Okay, and then this is I can't pronounce your name. It's adorable though. Gerlida Rosas, right? If I already repotted while in bloom, can I repot it to then original moss? I am not sure I understand this one. If you repotted it was in bloom, I would hold off on doing anything until it's finished blooming and then decide how to repot it. And don't put it in moss, put it in a, a fir bark combination medium. Okay. All right. All right. And we're going to get out of the chat box. And it is 1 o'clock. Holy smokes. I finished in time. There is one more question and answer. So I'll go to that. Ruthie, the leaves of my Phalaenopsis are wrinkled. Is that from over or underwatering? And will it go away? Wrinkling on a Phalaenopsis is from underwatering. And usually the leaf that gets wrinkled like that is going to stay like that. The new leaves that form when you improve your watering technique or your watering frequency, they'll be normal. But once they get that accordion look, they're kind of stuck like that. So to make you feel better, I showed you the photo of my of my Oncidium, and and I'm a professional, and I even did it. So so just keep them going, get new leaves, and then you can trim that one off, so no one will know. Okay. All right. This is great. Thank you so much. And I have one more chat, and then we'll. Oh, this was wonderful. Thank you very much. Great job. I appreciate you and Chalet. Mwah. Thank you very much. All right, everybody. Come and see us at the store, and come and see all the gorgeous orchids I showed you the photos of. We'll look for you later, okay? All right. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye.